funny, Tom. I'd like to say I'm Mark Wilde from Sky News, and then I'd be able to plug you in, and this should go out for masses, but sadly I'm not. Okay, when you access the sort of Akashic level, and as we have no time, can you access like past, present, and future? And if so, can you alter things within that?
Yes,
aspect?
All of the above. That was like 3 or 4 questions there. It's just yes, and yes. You can. It's not true that there is no time. There is time. Time is fundamental. Time is fundamental to a virtual reality. Time is defined when you have state A followed by state B. If I was this way and now I'm different, you have to have time. That defines time, you know. You can't have growth without time. You can't have change without time. So there is no such thing as a state A then grows to state B without time. That defines time itself. So time is kind of a little different issue, but it's not that there's no time. There is time, and time is very fundamental. Now it's you can say there's no space, and that space is always created. It's not fundamental to anything. It's just the rule set that you get in this virtual reality that defines the space. And all the various virtual realities can have their own clock, so time isn't universal, it's just fundamental. See, this is local time here. This is our local VR time. But a virtual reality is run by incrementing time. That's how you do a simulation of something. You know, what's it like now? Okay, then what did that affect? And okay, then what's it now? The next delta t and the next delta t, and it's a dynamic simulation runs on time. So does this. This is a dynamic simulation that we're in because it evolves, it changes. Therefore, it has to be time-based. So there's lots of time, but yes, the what you call Akashic records, what I call just databases. They come in really 2 databases. I break it into 3 because it suits people better. One is you have the future probable database. Those are all the things that possibly could happen and the probability that they would happen. So you get 2 things there. Everything that could happen and its probability of happening. And that can go out for as long as you want to increment time out. Then you have the present moment, which is where we are. It's where all the action is. It's where all the growth takes place. It's in the present moment. That's the important spot for us. And after that, then you have the past. And I break the past into 2 pieces because it's easier for people to comprehend. One is you take that probable future and all the things that could have happened and might happen, and then you get to the present moment. Well, only these things did happen. All the rest of it becomes unactualized past. Didn't happen. Could have happened, but didn't. And a probability is still associated with it that it might have happened. You see, so now we have this past reality. It's everything that could have happened, but didn't happen, and the probability that it might have. Getting confused? Next, you have what did happen. And what did happen is actually just a trace, a thread through that larger everything that could have happened, and then it becomes history after that delta t goes by. So think of this, our history, as just a trace through this larger history database. It's a trace of all the things that actually did happen. Those are the things that could have happened that did happen. And that then is our history, what we call history here on the planet. That would be our particular thread. So that's kind of the way the databases go. And the databases are basically models. They're probability models. This whole reality is a probability model. Okay, so the way they get the future probability model is they say, okay, given the present, what if we progressed it 1 delta t ahead? What's most likely, or what could happen? What are all the things that could happen? And then you say, well, here's all the things that could happen, and here's their probability that I think they'll happen based on what the state is now and what the state has been in the past. And they know these states pretty well because everything, all the people, all the things, all the way the air is moving, and the cracks are cracking, and the magma and everything else is part of the simulation. So they've got all the data, so it's pretty good prognostication. So then they say, and given that that's true, that one that we just guessed at, we'll say, what if that's true? Then what about the next one and the next one? And you just work the delta t out as long as you think it's reasonable. Of course, the farther out you go, the worse it gets, because you're piling assumption on assumption on assumption. And you can retrieve data from any of these databases. The way you retrieve data is with a query. Same way you retrieve data anywhere. The way you query is with your intent. So if you would like to know future probability, you can get that from the future probable database. But it's not just you think a database, you think of Google, where you get words back or pictures back. This is you get reality back. In other words, in that future probable database, there's so much information there that if you go into that, it's like being in a movie. It's like you're there. It's a place. Things are happening. People are there interacting. It's all probable future, you see. Or you can just get data. You can ask for something straightforward. Or you can visit. Same with the past. You can get into the past database, and it's just like being there, in a sense that it's as three-dimensional, as real as this room is now. And you can interact with the beings, and you can go there and talk to your Uncle Fred, and Uncle Fred will act just like Uncle Fred would act, because all the data that defines Uncle Fred, minus his free will, is available. Everything Uncle Frank knew is in the database. Everything he did, thought, felt, whatever, all of his deepest secrets, it's all there. So that's why you can go into that past database and get Uncle Fred to tell you something that nobody else in the family knows, and find out that it's true, because Uncle Fred has all the data. You see, so you can get into those databases, and it's just a query. When you go out of body in locale 1, all you're doing is getting data out of the database. Where the reason that you're in your room is because you believe you should be, because that's where you got out of body, because you think you're getting out of your body. And if you decide, well, I want to go over and see what's going on over at my friend's house, the reason you fly through the air and travel to your friend's house is believe you have to move to get someplace. And then when you get to your friend's house, you look around and you see what's there. You say, is he watching TV? Is he playing basketball? Is he doing this or that? And then you're going to call him up later and see if it's true, right? You're doing like an out of body or a remote view on it. And you're getting data out of the database. You're not getting it out of the future database, you're getting it out of the past database. But now, past, you say, well, that's not present, is it? No, the data's old. But how old is it? The time loop is about 10 to the minus 44 seconds. So your data's old, but it's only 10 to the minus 44 seconds old. So it's not that old. You can't tell it from the present, because what's present and what's 10 to the minus 44 seconds away from the present is invisible to you. So it's basically, you can kind of see it in the moment that you're getting that data. So that's the way it works. And people have a lot of misconceptions about that. And that's one of the reasons that people have this idea that there's no time, because somebody told them that the future and the present and the past all exist at the same time. And that's true, but it's not true in the way that you take it. It's true in the fact that these databases all exist at the same time. So the probable future's there, the past is there, the present, it's all there, and it's all there at the same time. So you can visit the past, visit the future, but it doesn't mean that there's no time and they all exist simultaneously. It just means it's a big database.
So is that how you bring a manifestation through then?
All right, that was the last of your questions. Your intent modifies future probability. So you have this future probability with all the probabilities of the things that might happen. You can modify those probabilities with your intent. Now, a fuzzy, hazy intent will modify it a fuzzy, hazy amount. A very strong, clear intent will modify it more strongly and more clearly. That's why when you get to that point consciousness state, it's a good doorway, because there your intent is clear. Because in that state, by definition, there is no noise. It's just you, pure point of consciousness. And there your intent's very clear. So there is a good place to work your healing. There is a good place to decide where you want to go next and put it in as your intention, or to get information. That's why I call it the doorway. That's where you start and can do everything else from there real well. So the intention, now it doesn't mean that you can make everything happen you want, it's just that you can modify the probability. So let's say here's something and the probability of it happening is 4951. Well, there's one that if you have a clear intent, you could probably modify. But here's one that's 100,000 to 1. You may move that all the way up to 1,000 to 1. You've just moved it up, 2 whole orders of magnitude. You're really powerful, but it still doesn't happen. You see, it's that way. So it depends on how probable it is, how far you have to move it, how much power you bring to it with a focused intent, and you can change the future. That's how we heal. That's what we're doing when we're healing. We use tools like I'm going to diagnose you, and whatever is unhealthy about you, I'll see as black spots, and whatever is healthy, I'll see as white, and then I'll use my white energy bar tool, and I'll turn your dark spots to white spots, and that's how I heal you. You see, well, there is no light. Light's just a metaphor. There is, the white spots, black spots is just metaphors. All of that is a game for my mind to differentiate what my intention is. My intent is to turn those black spots white, because I've defined white as healthy. See, in my mind. Now, if I'm clear about that, and that's my intent, then it works just fine. If I wanted to do the opposite, that works well too. I could say, well, all the disease stuff is white, and all the good stuff is a nice, glossy, pretty black. That works just as well. See, there's nothing magic about any of that. It's just a tool that you use to focus your intent. The only active ingredient here is conscious intent. In any of this stuff, whether you're going out of body or you're healing, the active ingredient is conscious intent. So that's how you can affect things. So how does for some reason I can't remember this, probably because it's got some negative connotations to it, but what is the thing with the secret? You make the universe give you a new Mercedes-Benz.
Law of attraction.
Law of attraction, yeah. The way the law of attraction works is just by that. If you can focus your intent, you can change the probability. Okay, so the law of attraction works, and before the law of attraction, there was positive thinking. That's back in the 1950s. I think it was Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, 1955 or something. It's not like a new idea, and everybody will tell you that people who are positive and up and optimistic, good things happen. They accomplish things. Things work. People who are sad and woe is me, nothing ever works for me, life sucks, they have that attitude. Things don't work for them. It doesn't happen. Well, that's because they're biasing all the probabilities to the negative, because that's where their mind is. So all that does work. It's just the nature of consciousness. You can heal somebody by changing the probability of their illness, the progression of that illness. You can make that illness go away by changing its probability. I don't know. That's how all your prognostication happens. You toss the chicken bones, and then you read the chicken bones and see, what's going to happen in the future. Well, whether it's chicken bones, tea leaves, positions of the stars, these are all ways that you can prognosticate. And the way you do that is that those things are tools that you use to help focus your mind on gathering data from the future probability database. And some people are very good at it. And they're very good at their tarot cards or their I Ching sticks or their tea leaves or whatever, because those things really don't matter. They're just tools. They're tricks to focus your intent on what it is you want. But you have to be good at having a focused intent to begin with. You see, if your mind's noisy, it doesn't work. So the lady dealing the tarot cards, the astrologer plotting the horoscope, the guy tossing the chicken bones, all of them first have to be in tune, you see, with the larger reality. Being in the right state's important. And people who do that will tell you, if you read tea leaves, and if you say, here, get up and stand on one foot and sing while you read these tea leaves, they'll say, sorry, I can't do that, you see, because that messes up my focus. They don't even know that they don't say, well, I go to point consciousness first. They don't know any of that. They just get in that state. And being in that state is what makes it work. That's why computers don't make very good astrologers. Though they can compute where the heavenly bodies are to 20 decimal places and do it in seconds. They're still kind of astrologers because they're not in tune with the database. So they're guessing most of the time. And it's not really where the stars are. It's the quality of the astrologer's intent and their mind and how focused they can be and how in touch they are with you and your energy and that energy, and they get the data, and then they interpret it in terms of where the stars are, or where the chicken bones are, or where the tea leaves are, or what cards turn up, or how the sticks fell. You see, all those things are just tool sets that allow a focused intent to work, either gathering data or manipulating probabilities. So that's how it works. That's how time can be a variable in all of that. You see, when I do my workshops, I do these little remote viewing things and healing things where I give people targets. You know, Joe Smith has an illness. You know, what is it? And they have to draw a picture on a little figure and that kind of thing. And some of those things are 5, 6, 7 years old. And when I make the video, I say, for those of you who are watching this on the video, you know, if it's much later than when this was done, just intend that your answer, you know, be as it was, you know, 2003, you know, or something like that. And I get things all the time from emails of people say, wow, I don't believe it. I took that and I got 100% of it right. You know, how could I do that? That's long gone. Those people, you know, a lot of them were really sick with cancer and things like that, and a lot of those people weren't even alive yet, but they saw their energy bodies, they picked the thing up. An energy body is just a tool. It's a metaphor. It doesn't really exist as a fundamental thing. I mean, I've seen auras since I was probably 20-something. It took me a long time to realize that they were just information. It's just the way you display information. You get that query out of the database and you display it as colors in kind of an egg around a humanoid shape, and the colors mean things to you. See, with a little research, I found out that the colors could be anything. They were arbitrary. If you say, I want red to be anger, which is kind of traditional, right? Because we go look at Ledbetter's book, Man, Visible, Invisible, and then we all kind of key off of that. And but if you want it to be blue or pink or anything else, you can say, okay, here's my output format. Here's the colors. Here was what I want them to mean. Now, give me the data based on that. That's the way it comes out. So this is a neat query system. Not only can you tell it what you want, but you can specify the output format. You can get a graphical format. If you'd say, I'd like to see this person's health as health on the y-axis, maximum health being up here, 0 down here, and on this axis is time, and I want it to be every 5 years. Go out 20 years. I want to see that graph. There's the graph. You see, you can get graphical output. Most people don't ever think to ask for graphical output, but you can. It'll give you any output you want. That's part of what you can query the system and ask for. So you get the information and you get at the output of your choice. So if your output is, I want the dark stuff to be what's not good and the light stuff to be what's good, well, then that's graphical output too. You see? So that's kind of how it works. There is no such thing as light. You know, there are no such, chakras are not fundamental. They're a real good way of organizing data so that we can talk about it and deal with it. Remember, we need metaphors. It's hard for us. If we were just here and, well, first of all, if we were here and couldn't use metaphors, we'd be miming, right? We'd be doing, I'd be doing these hand things, you'd be guessing at what I meant. Words are metaphors. So we need metaphors to communicate. And what we do when we have this, you know, something like chakras, people have gone out, they've experienced things. They come back and they explain. There's this energy, and this energy does various kinds of things, and it affects you in various kinds of ways. And they take all these various experiences they've had, and they say, well, these kinds of ways kind of affect this part of your body, and then or this part of your aura, or this part of whatever. So they bring together a system, a metaphor, if you will, that makes sense. And that's a tool then. And other people can use that tool. So then you can focus on that crown chakra and have it affect, you see, your aura in that space. Aura is a metaphor. Crown chakra is a metaphor. All these metaphors are tools helping you focus your intent and understand information in such a way that we can talk about it and share it. So we need chakras, you see. We need light beams. We need all this stuff because we need ropes to climb up and, you know, all these devices, because that allows us to talk and communicate and put our information in a form that we can share and will be helpful to somebody else if they happen to resonate with our metaphor. If they don't, well, you have to find something else. you see? So metaphor, the chakras are not fundamental things. Now, there's probably lots of people that would want to throw something at me when I say that, because the chakras are very central to their belief system. And to challenge that belief would be sacrilege and so on. But that's just the way it is. Some people really don't like it when you say there is no light. When you're in the larger conscious system, you have no eyes. You don't see things. You get data, you interpret them, and you interpret them in terms of sense data, because that's all you know how to do. And if you don't do that, you can't even think the thought, because until you put it into sense data metaphors, it's not even a coherent thought that you can imagine. And not much less something that you can tell somebody else and they'll get an idea. That's why it is when you come back from an out of body and you're explaining it, it's like, well, it was sort of like this and sort of like, you're going through all of this stuff trying to explain it, and that's because that's not really it at all. It's an experience that you cannot directly, translate, because it's just an experience. And you turn it into metaphors because that's all you can do. And you either do that or you don't communicate it. But you have to turn it into some kind of metaphor just to be able to think it, much less say it. You don't have to think it, though. It can just be an experience, and leave it at the feeling level. It's just an experience. I remember it, and that's it. Don't define it. Don't box it in. And that's okay, but that won't do. If you're left brain, you can't stand that, right? You need to name it and put it in a box. If you're right brain, you can deal with that. But if you have to tell to somebody else, then if you're left brain, you'll try real hard to be precise and get very frustrated because you can't be precise. It's all over the place. And if you're right brain, nobody will listen to you anyway. So, because they know you're kind of, they won't listen to what you say. So, pardon me, I'm having a little fun here. You have to have a sense of humor. Todd's right on that. That's one, I didn't mention it when I was talking, but one of the things, and I said the things that will keep you from being successful, and one of them is taking it too seriously. That'll keep you from being successful. Okay, we have more questions? There's a young lady in the back who's had her hand up now at least 3 or 4 times and deserves a chance. Oh, wow, that's even better.
You mentioned about fear being an obstacle in getting out of body, and that we try and do things to minimize the fear, but actually they're not successful. We have to go to the root. Could you elaborate on that? What would be a way of getting to the root? How could you do
fear.
that?
That's a good question. And earlier today, I was asked, how do you get rid of fear, of ego, beliefs, all these things? How do you find them? Because they're not in your intellect, really. So how do you dig them up? It's a very good question, and a lot of people want to know that. So I'm sure everybody has the same thing. Fear has only one antidote that I know of, and that's courage. Sorry, that's a tough answer, but it only has one antidote, and that's courage. And the way that I suggest that you apply that courage is like this. You look at the fear. So let's say the fear is that if you get out of body, you won't come back. You'll die. Okay? So that's just a fear. You say, well, okay, I'll accept that fear. If that fear if what I fear comes to be, I'll accept it. I'll deal with it. It's okay with me. As soon as you accept the fear, it's like, give me your worst shot. It's that kind of an idea. If you can accept that and honestly accept it, not just trying to trick yourself in your head, then the fear loses its teeth. It's got no more bite. You already accept the worst it can do. What can it do to you? You've accepted it. So let's say your fear is that people won't like you, or that nobody loves you, or you're inadequate, or one of these other fears that a lot of people walk around with. You have to do the same thing. Well, if I get up and my presentation is inadequate and terrible and nobody likes it, and I did a terrible job, and that's a fear that I have, then the way to deal with it is say, okay, I'll accept that. I'll just do the best I can. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and I'll accept it. Well, then if you're going to accept that, then you no longer can worry about it, because it's okay if it happens. You won't like it, but it's like you go through the whole thing. I won't like it. Nobody will talk to me. I'll get bad press. It won't feel good, but it's just the way it is. It's the best I can do now, and I'll live with it. I'll deal with it. I'll do better next time. Then you get over it. So courage, tell your fear to give it your best shot. You'll take it. You'll deal with it. And then let it go. Forget about it. If you don't come back, you don't come back. So if the fear of death in a newbie bothers you, then you have to be prepared to die. Tough language, right? You have to be prepared to do it. Huh?
The ones you can't identify, where it's a fear of something, but you're not quite sure what it is.
Not quite sure where. Well, one good way to find your fears, and it won't work with all fears, but with most fears, ego is much easier to find than fear. It just stands right out on you. And ego is easy, and all ego traces back to fear. Fear is the origin of ego. Ego is how you deal with fear. It's the personal way you deal with fear. And fear is also the root of most beliefs. Beliefs because you don't like being unsure, that you don't know. So if there's something you really feel is important and you need to know, but you don't know and you can't find out, then the average person will make something up and believe it. Then they don't have to worry about it. Okay, that's gone. You know, whether they believe it to the positive or negative side doesn't matter. That's just the way they feel and they go on with it. So belief is often because of fear. Look for ego. Ego is noticeable whenever something unpleasant, negative, anxiety, anger, any of those things show up. If you're irritated, if you don't like the way somebody did something, all of those things are going to be expressions of your ego. They will trace back to a fear. Why does that bother me? Why does that upset me? What's my fear? And once you get to the fear, then deal with the fear, and that expression of ego will probably go away with it. What happens with fear is that we tend to make our fears come true. So because we fear it, we have that intention. It's in our mind, that's going to happen, that might happen. All that might happen kind of fear, what's that do? It puts program into raising the probability that it'll happen. So we create our own fears because we tend to dwell on them. When we dwell on them, it means we tend to put a lot of energy in them over a long period of time. We dwell on them and we create them. So you're a parent, you're afraid that your children are going to do drugs. So what do? You forbid them to go out of the house, you lock them in the closet, you feed them by sliding food under the door. They have no access to drugs, and what do? You drive them to drugs, right? You see, you create the thing that you're trying to stop. You're afraid that nobody will like you, so what do? You act big and tough and noisy and push people around because you're afraid that nobody likes you, and what happens? They don't like you. You see? You create the fear. I mean, you make the fear happen. That's the way it is. So look for anything negative, find the fear, and get rid of it. Because the fear is usually creating the problem itself. You see? The only problem is the fear itself. So once you get rid of the fear, the problem tends to disappear. You behave in a way automatically that makes the fear come true. So if you're afraid that you won't get out of body and all this will be useless, that fear will prevent you from going out of body. Fear won't let you relax to the point that you can focus your intent in the proper way and let go of the experience and just let it happen because you're too uptight with the fear. So it manifests itself that way. So you need to find those fears and track them down. Best way is through ego. You'd say, well, why is it that it's so important to me that I get out of body? Why is it that I'd be so upset if this doesn't happen? You see, that's your fear. There's a fear about, if I don't get out of body, that's a bummer. Well, why is it a bummer? Why isn't it like, well, I worked on this experience to see what would happen and it didn't happen. Maybe it'll happen next time. You see, but that's not it. It's, it didn't happen. And in that, there's a fear somewhere that's aggravating you. And why? You see? And now you get back to expectation, or not being good enough, or not being as good as everybody else, or being behind, or not as evolved as other people are, or what's wrong with me? You see? I'm inadequate. I can do all, those fears can run everywhere, right? So then you're a wreck. You know, by the time you leave this place, it's, you know, you're a total wreck, just because, you know, of a fear of performance. So people have performance fears. Every time you ask somebody to get up and perform, they have fears of being inadequate and not performing well. People have to get up and talk in front of other people. People that are just asked to do they give somebody these little ESP devices. You know, there's a random number going to light lights, and you're supposed to say what light's going to come up next, or point to the square that you think will light up next. And as long as you just say, "Oh, just do it," and point at it and see what happens, and they're very nonchalant, they tend to do pretty well with it. And as soon as you say, "Oh, you're doing really well, you must be good at this," they can't do it at all. Matter of fact, it's so consistent that they can do it like 20 or 30 times and never get it right, which is like, 1 in 50 probability. Well, that's paranormal, right? They're doing things that are not normal because they are actually avoiding getting the right answer because they're so afraid of the right answer. They're bound up with the fear. Something instead says it's going to be there, so don't hit there because you might be wrong, and you always get it wrong. So that's they call it performance anxiety. It's very common. We all have that. We have to go perform, and if it's important to us that we perform well, and performance anxiety because you're trying to perform and out of body, that happens too. You just need to find the fear. Why is it a problem? Why does it create a fear? Why do I feel inadequate? It may take you back through all kind of a labyrinth of all sorts of things. And the trouble with most people is as they get deeper and deeper, they get to places they don't want to go. It's like, I don't think I really want to see that. I don't want to deal with that because it gets deeper into things that are more fundamental. The way it expresses itself out here is just superficial. The roots go deeper sometimes, and they go to places that aren't pleasant to go, to admit things that you don't want to admit, to see things you don't want to see, and then you say, well, I searched for it and couldn't find it. I'll go do something else now, that sort of thing. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's really easy to say, oh, get rid of your fear and ego and stuff, but it's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of time and effort and perseverance, and it's one little step at a time. But finding ego is the easy thing, because all of us will have these little negative things we don't like, things that annoy us, things that upset us. I mean, that's just normal in life, right? But find out why. Dig to the root of it, and you'll find a fear. Somebody stood you up or made you wait a long time, and it's aggravated you. Well, why is it that waiting aggravated you? Well, you probably find out that the other person's actions make you feel that they don't think you're that important. You see, so it's a matter of a fear of not being important, or a fear that other people might think that you're not important as you'd like to be thought of. You see, so that's a problem. That's where the fear is. So it's all those negative things will take you there, and then it's like, well, why is it so important to me that these people, think I'm important? And you'll find out why, because there's the inadequacy. There's the I'm not, as valuable as I should be to this organization, or maybe I'm not in line for the next promotion, or whatever reasons you come up with, but they're all fear-based. So that's it. With ego is the easiest one to spot. Spotting beliefs are hard because you believe them. Finding a belief is difficult because you're already sold that it's true. So finding something that's not, finding how something's not true when it's true is very difficult. The only thing is you have to give up beliefs altogether and just be skeptical and say, I no longer believe anything. I don't have beliefs. I have things that I know because of my experience, and I give those a probability of such and such because of the strength of my experience, and things that maybe, and let it go at that.
I wanted to ask a question about what you just said about belief system. Can you actually go out of body and explore your beliefs?
Yes, matter of fact, that's a good thing to do. When I say that you should ask questions that are vital to your growth, that's one good thing that you can do. You can go out there and ask about your beliefs, and you will get some answers back. What are the beliefs I have? They'll probably come in pictures, they'll come in metaphors, they'll come in symbols. You'll have to interpret them, but you'll get stuff back about your beliefs, and you can explore those beliefs. And when you get one, you dig in. Just like Todd was saying, you get a little information, you dig in for a little more. Because the first information you get is going to be high level and sketchy because they just want to know how serious you are. If you grab hold of that and say, okay, where does this lead? Tell me more. You'll get the next piece. Tell me more, you'll get the next piece. So as long as you keep after it, it'll tend to get more and more specific and more whatever. And then you can think about yourself. Does this feel right? Does this feel right? And then you might say, well, I'm not so sure I believe that, whoever's been telling me this. Can you give me some sort of example? And then keep your eyes open over the next couple of days or weeks and see if something more dramatic doesn't happen that points an arrow to that subject. Often you'll get that if you ask for an example or something to make it clearer. Often something will happen if you're paying attention to it that'll point to exactly that thing and that response. You'll have some kind of response, and then the aha moment will come. Oh, that's what they were talking about. So yes, that's a good thing to do. Study your beliefs, study your fears, see what comes up. Sometimes if you just ask for fears, the consciousness system will give you a whole series of fear tests just to see what you're afraid of. And first they'll just be kind of making you feel at ease, a wax dummy with something will come up that's obviously very fake, and you say, well, that didn't scare me, and that didn't scare me. And then once they kind of get you lulled where you're no longer dealing with your conscious mind, then they hit you with the real stuff. So they're very clever at their things, and you'll learn a lot if you pay attention and ask them questions. Unfortunately, most of us don't. We just go out and drift around, see what happens. We don't really take the opportunity to do something with it. But out of body can be a very powerful learning tool. It's real. It's real data. I'd say 90% of it, even the data that you're not sure whether you're making it up or not, 90% of it, 98% of it is real data. It's a real place. You're getting real data. It's not always easy to get evidence that it's real data, but most of the time it is. It's not that often that people go up there and then just imagine things, because that's not the state you're in. I mean, some people may be more imaginative than others, but that's not that typical. Most of the time, what you're getting is real. Just don't have a lot of evidence to verify that. The man behind the camera.
Hi, I'm just sort of interested in asking a question about this idea of the game player who is actually playing us. I mean, does it? And in my mind, it's kind of equating to this other idea of the higher self. Something that is the higher self. That was interesting. Welcome, higher self. And what is the dynamic between what we are here and the kind of game player, and why are we? Well, I understand your when you talk about this is a great learning environment, the rules and the things here that allow us to learn. But I'm also seeing that something, a concept I have of a higher self would be someone or something that is already quite evolved. It already has a lot of love. It has a lot of, it's in a higher state. So why is it necessary for us to be down here as a separate entity? And how does that dynamic work? Is there some quality to being here that is really useful?
Yes, and I think the thing that is causing the confusion is the idea that the higher self is really a very wise self. Basically, you're consciousness, okay? And as an individuated unit of consciousness, you want to evolve, so you'd like to get on a fast track. So you take a part of yourself and partition it off, if you will, and that partitioned off part of yourself then is going to become this character in the game. It's going to be the thinking, feeling. It's the brain on, it's the hand on the mouse, if you will, in the computer game. So it's going to play that character or experience the things that character would experience based on the rule set of what that character can experience. So you have this piece of your self that's having this experience. And it is just representative of you. If you are, if we're saying that then what I'm calling you then is also your higher self, you're not really any more learned or grown than that piece. But that piece is now down in the mix. People are kicking sand in his face, and he's getting upset because he's in this environment that does that to you, right? And you're not. You're up in this environment where you have kind of the global vision. You're standing over the shoulder there, looking at the game going on, and you can see things. You have a bigger perspective. So as a higher self, you have a much bigger perspective of what's going on. That little part of yourself is kind of just in the game. Its perspective is the character's perspective. Okay, it's the working part, but it's in that game. It's playing that virtual reality game. It's in there walking around and having sand kicked in its face. So you have a much broader, if you will, wiser perspective because you see more. Like your grandfather, has been there and done a whole lot more things. So he has this sense of stableness and vision that you don't have when you're 12 or 13. But it doesn't mean that you, as far as your quality of consciousness, your entropy, are any different at the root than this guy that's playing down there. So it's not that your higher self is all-knowing and full of love. It understands the game better, but you're all evolving together. Okay, and now you have another incarnation and you play a different character. Or you may play two characters at once. You may even play two characters at once that interact with each other. There's all kinds of things that you can do. So you're playing a character and they all add. Everyone you play, you learn something. You learn something about interaction from this game going on, and you learn it on the fast track because stuff happens so quickly down here that you learn those things, and that then gets kind of uploaded, if you will, to you. Now your quality goes up because of the decisions that you made, that part of you that was in the game made, accrue to you, and your quality of being increases. So you're like the repository of it. You call yourself the higher self or the oversoul or whatever. You're kind of the repository of all these various lives. But you're not really any more highly evolved than they are when they start. You might be after they're done because they may de-evolve a little bit. But see, that may just pull you down a smidgen, just a little bit, because they're just one out of a whole lot of inputs that have been made to you. So if there's been 1,000 inputs like that made to you, and one of that 1,000 was in a negative direction, it doesn't have that big an impact on you. You see, you're the collection, you're the sum of all of it. So in that way, you can say you're kind of above the fray, in a way, because the things that are positive, unfortunately, they don't really have that big an impact on you either, unless they're really, really positive. But they pull you up a little. Growth is by small steps, by having more ups than downs, by kind of a collective assimilation of things. So that's how it plays. So that character is just consciousness, and that consciousness is experiencing everything you're experiencing, making choices, doing everything that you do. And that's why I say that the brain doesn't really process anything or really store anything. That's the consciousness that's playing that game. It's what's doing all that. But yet it has to abide by the rule set. The rule set describes what can happen, what sort of data can you get out of that simulation. So somebody comes up to your character and hits them on the head with a lead pipe and gives them brain damage. Well, now that just created another constraint on your character. Now they can't necessarily send that kind of data. They can't speak maybe anymore. Maybe their speech center was damaged. So they can no longer speak. So speech data is no longer available to that character because the rule set says that part of the brain that does speech has now been compromised because of the lead pipe. So you see, it looks like the brain's doing it because you damage the brain in this spot and it makes a difference, but it's really not that way. It's the rule set says that because that brain's damaged there, then speech doesn't work. So it's that kind of a thing.
This is kind of a question that sort of goes along with that. I mean, you may need someone to come and hit you with a lead pipe here for you to have a learning experience in a way.
Yeah, sometimes.
And would you then, or all the players who are playing the game, the negative element that comes into this game is that it seems to be necessary, and is that something that would be consciously, if I can't think of a better word than that, but that would be consciously put into the game? Because if every player who played the game was positive and came down here with very positive intentions, we would all evolve very quickly, and we would all grow very quickly, and we'd reach the sort of successful result, and the game would be over, and maybe there wouldn't be as much learning space between the starting point and actually getting to this conclusion.
Is the evil put there on purpose? Well, what's put there on purpose is the free will, and the free will allows the bad stuff to happen. Now, you may have a very particular instance where the incarnation is more scripted instead of less scripted, where you've decided that there's certain things would be good for you to learn. Getting hit by a lead pipe is hard to imagine as a good thing, but maybe. Certain illnesses are like that. People have illnesses often because they need them. The illness is something that you bring on to yourself more often than not. Sometimes you just catch a bug from somebody else that makes you sick, but that's just random stuff. There is random stuff in this too. There is random interactions going on, what other people do and why they do it, that has nothing to do with you at all. It just happens to end up with a lead pipe hit you in the head because you were at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's the way that cookie crumbles. Maybe you'll do better next time. It's that sort of thing. So there is some randomness in it, but there is some planning. And it could be that an illness or an injury, or being born with one leg, or taking a fall and having your spine severed so that you're quadriplegic or something, might be an experience that would be very growing for you, something you need to have, and you could kind of plan on that, and it would get nudged to that conclusion. So some of that bad stuff could be planned, but for the most part, there's plenty of unpleasantness to go around. We don't have to create much of it. It seems to create itself in sufficient numbers. If it didn't, maybe some would have to be created. The other part of that question is, it's not that if we were all positive, we would all grow very quickly and whatever, but I don't think we get to game over. I don't think you grow up, you get to the point and say, okay, I'm done, game over, I've learned everything. Now I'm one with the larger system, and I don't exist anymore, I'm just one with the system. It doesn't really work like that, is my sense of it anyway, because the system itself is still evolving. It's a moving target. The system is growing. There's always something else to do. If you're fairly well evolved and your growth has slowed down some, let's put you back someplace where you can help others, where you can be a good example, where you can lead something that you can help people. Maybe you can be Mother Teresa and help the poor people that live in the poverty part of India, or something like that. You can be helpful because you have that quality that would make you be that way. Well, that'll help a whole lot of people, and guess what? It also helps you too. Even if your growth is kind of slowed down, the growth is faster and faster, and it has to kind of get a little asymptotic, right, where it comes in slower steps. And those slow steps can take a long time, and there's always more work to do, more people to help, more things to be, more lessons to learn. And so I don't think there is an end. I don't really subscribe to you get to a point and then it's over. And you can also, as I was saying with these examples with Sale, you can become one with the larger system and still be an individual. That doesn't compromise your individuality. That just says you're a cooperative member of the whole, and you work with the whole rather than against it. Doesn't mean you're not you. You still have all the experiences you've ever had are still there, and they still define you, the entity. So that's just, computers are good at storing data. There's no reason to take your data and erase it and say, oh, he's one with the whole now. Your data is still going to be available.
Well, just one final little bit, if I can just add on that, is are there constantly new players entering the game?
Yes. The game's open-ended, and there's constantly new players entering the game. So it's not like this is a graduating class that moves all up together, and when we're done, we're all done together, sort of thing, where we all go even to different things. It's constantly new players entering the game at the other end. And there's constantly some people evolving that'll turn around and evolve again. But new players, this consciousness game isn't just played with humans. This consciousness game is played with all things that are conscious. And what's conscious? Conscious is something that has a finite decision space. So if you can intentionally do A instead of B because you had two choices, then you're conscious. Now, it may be a very tiny conscious. You may be a bumblebee, and your decisions may be this flower or that flower, or a couple of other things like that. So you're not very conscious, but that's consciousness, where you can make a decision, a free will decision, with with a finite, a non-zero decision space. And then that progresses on the way up. And any of you who have dogs and cats and things like that, you know that there's a lot of intelligence there. There's a lot of consciousness there. There's anticipation, there's love, there's fear, there's all kinds of things going on in there, and they certainly do make choices. And it's not all just triggered by their genetics. They are actually making decisions, and they're learning. And they're doing the same thing. When they do well, they learn. They have free will, and they grow too. And if they get to the point where they're ready for something more challenging, well, why not try out a human form? You see? Why not see how that goes? So the consciousness is boiling up from the ground up, which is how it started in the first place. It kind of has to boil up from the ground up. And besides that, there are people from other systems. This system that we're in within consciousness that has this kind of this virtual reality system, it's kind of one virtual reality within a system of virtual realities. There are people from outside of that, from other virtual realities, that will sometimes come here and start. And besides that, the system itself can just start a new player, start a new game. As long as, and just like in World of Warcraft, the conscious systems can start a new player without a consciousness. It can kind of play it. What do they call those? It's not a player that's sitting out there with a mouse, but it's a game. Player played with the game.
AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah, there's a name for those characters.
NPC.
Huh?
NPC.
NPC. What's it stand for?
Non-personal character.
Non-personal character. Non-person character. So they could even play some of those if they wanted to. Just as a foil. It's not a lot, because we mix things up and mess things up and create enough interest ourselves, but there's nothing that would keep the system from playing an NPC. They could.
That may be happening here. In your experience, is that a likely thing that happens here, that there are non-player characters?
But you might experience one. You might experience some kind of, sometimes you experience things that later you can't tell whether they're really there. You may run into somebody, and I don't know, you may be lost in a city someplace, and you're really getting desperate, and somebody will come over and say, "Are you looking for such and such?" It's right down that street to the left. And you go, "Oh, thanks a lot." And you take a couple of steps, you turn around, they're not there. They're just not there. And you say, "Where could they go? It's a long street." Either they just, did they go hide someplace or what? It's only been a few seconds. That may be an NPC. You see, that you weren't aware enough to get the message. The only way you could get it is if it came across physical terms. So that may be an NPC. So those things sometimes will happen. So yeah, you might run into NPCs and never know it. Somebody will nudge you this way and that because you need a nudge, and you're too thick-headed to be nudged through your intuition, which is where typically people get nudged through their intuition. Some people are real thick and they don't pay attention to their intuition. And they say, "Oh yeah, my intuition says go right, but I can't ever trust that. I'll go left." You just can't get through, or they don't pay any attention to it. Intuition, I don't believe in that. That's bunk. So they need something else, and if it's important to nudge them, you do something more physical. Who knows? A street may be blocked off and they can't go that way, so that they have to go the way that they're supposed to go, or an NPC gets into it, or some other kinds of thing can happen. And there's no problem with that as long as there's no inconsistency. So that street might be blocked off, so they're forced to take the route you want them to take, And as long as they don't come back there, 5 minutes later and find it's not blocked off, that would be a problem. But as long as there's no inconsistency, the larger consciousness system is playing all the ends of this game. See, they're playing the front, the back, and the middle. As long as they don't create an inconsistency in the game, they can get away with anything. That's why it's almost nothing is impossible. When somebody says, what about this? Is that possible? It's like, yeah, everything's possible. It's some things are not likely, or some things are very likely, but almost nothing's impossible, because this is a game of statistics. This is a game of probability. And in a game, in a simulation like this, there can be all kinds of squirrely things that can happen. I remember my son who was playing Civilization, and he was losing, and I was watching him play, and he says, "Hey Dad, watch this." He takes him some keys, and suddenly on his game board was a Mercedes-Benz with a nuclear weapons launcher in it. In Civilization, of course, which was all cavemen and pre-Egypt and all that kind of stuff. And he says, "That's a cheat I learned." So there was a cheat in the game that the people who made the game, with their fooling around with the game, they put the cheat in there, and if you knew how to access it, you could get a Mercedes-Benz with a nuclear weapons launcher in it. So you can do very unusual things with digital simulations. Of course, in this simulation, they won't happen. Those kinds of things wouldn't happen because they would create a discontinuity. They would create a problem. In order to maintain the integrity of the simulation, that can happen. But that doesn't mean that some funny stuff can't be pulled here and there that leaves no trace. That can happen.
Yeah, I've got more questions, but maybe someone else wants to have a go.
Yeah, that gets into the science certainty principle, which says anything can happen as long as it doesn't leave a trace, as long as there's enough uncertainty to mask it. I see a few reasonable people are going to bed. We won't let that bother the rest of us.
Just very briefly, I wonder if it's possible to go back to fear. You mentioned the antidote is courage, and I can see how you can argue away and accept the worst on a whole load of things to dispel the fear. What if you know that one of, if not the fundamental fear that you have is fear of death itself, not just by OBEing, but full stop. And it's a real sort of deep existential angst, so it's not just fear of death, it's fear of eternal life. How do you accept that? How do you really, honestly, truly accept that so you can then move on from it and get on with your life without it dominating?
Well, what's the worst thing that can happen there? Start listing out what are the downsides? What's the stuff that's scary about it? Okay, so everlasting life or death, either one. What's the scary thing about it?
When I was 10, I decided that both were equally scary. It was a sort of, well, if it's eternal, what if I get bored? And I don't like it. And I also didn't like the idea of just suddenly not existing.
Okay, well then you take the worst and say, well, if it's eternal life and I get bored, there's nothing I can do about it, right? And if it's eternal life, it's eternal life. And either you get bored or not bored, then you'll just exist bored. There is absolutely no way that you can change it. It's not like eternal life unless I change my mind. If it is, then you should try to convince yourself that you should not fret over things that you cannot do anything about. If it's completely outside of your ability to change, then you accept it because, worry is, as Spock would say, it's irrational. There's no sense worrying over something that is just going to happen and there's nothing you can do about it. So, okay, I'll accept it. I have no choice. It's not like somebody's asking me, will you accept that and will you like it? They don't care whether I'll accept it or like it or not.
It's like
it just is.
You're still trying to solve it. Something is in me is still trying to find a solution to it. Even if there's no solution, something is not letting go of it and is still trying to solve it.
And if it's the other way, if it's death that frightens you, then you have to just get to the point where you say, we're all going to die. I'm going to die. I'll come back. I'll do another life. This is one chapter in a very long book. It's not that important.
But if you're not 100% convinced that you will come back if you don't have that faith.
If it's a mind trick, then you'll know that you're pulling a mind trick on yourself and it won't work. You have to really, at the deep level, at the being level, you have to get to the point where you just accept it and say it is, or there is no solution. This is not something I'm going to solve. And if you really, at the deep being level, feel that way, if that's it, you're just not going to solve it, or it just doesn't matter if you do solve it, because it's going to be whatever it is anyway, and me stewing about it is completely counterproductive, just let it go, then I think it'll go away if you can do that. But now, again, that's an easy thing to say, not necessarily an easy thing to do, because your mind doesn't want to let it go. For some reason, it wants to struggle with that problem. So then maybe I'd ask the question of why does it want to struggle with that problem? Why is it hung up there on that problem? What's the point of that? What else is going on there that may be a solution to? Keeping that problem going? And I start working on not the problem itself, but that the problem is just just something else. Yeah, there's something else going on. There's some reason why that's happening, why you're hung on that point and you can't come to that conclusion, and it just keeps after you. Why is that? You see, and I'd take that.
So take that to point consciousness and then ask.
Yeah, take that to point consciousness and ask would be a very good thing to do with it. But I think I'd work on that because there's probably another reason. If you can't get to the point that it's irrelevant, it doesn't matter, let it go, that's rational. So if that doesn't work and you can't get to that point, then I'd say it's happening for some other reason. The thing that you're taking, this death or, all life or all death, that's not really the issue, that's a red herring. It's there for some other reason. Something that it's probably some fear that it's keeping at bay, some issue that you won't have to do. One of the strategies we all play is I can't lose if I don't play. That's a strategy that we use for fear. We have a fear and we're afraid of public speaking, so we just never public speak, you see. I can't lose if I don't play. That's how we deal with fear a lot. So this may be a fear that prevents you from playing so that you can't lose.
It's preventing me from living.
Right, and it will also prevent you from winning, you see. But preventing you from losing may really be the idea, and you'll have to find out losing what? What does this prevent me from doing? It's like if I solved this problem and it wasn't a problem, what awful thing would happen? Oh, I'd be faced with this other issue, and that's really the problem. And I don't want to deal with that issue, so I'm just not going to play. I'm going to get this other thing that keeps me out of the game, and then I don't have to deal with it. So the game may not be actually the game that's going on.
So even when you think you've got the core fear, if it's still there and you're not shifting it, then
it's probably
underneath.
It's probably something else that's underneath. I'd say what's attached to that? Is there something that you trying to avoid, some game that you don't want to play, something that if that wasn't there, it would force you into some other thing that would be upsetting, some other choice that you'd have to make, whether it was either one of those two it came to you. And maybe that you were 10 years old doesn't give you any hints, because you also are carrying the same quality and input and things learned from lots and lots of lifetimes, and that stuff, particularly when you're 10 years old, can come back at that age because you're open to it. You haven't learned that that's ridiculous yet, so it tends to come sometimes. So I'd look elsewhere for it. I think that's probably a red herring and a dead end, and rather struggle with that. See what that enables or disables, and look for that stream.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, want to take a break?
Yeah, we'll take.
Want to take any guesses of how many people come back? Want to do a little pool here?
What's the future? We only need to take a break.